Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalrin, and today I want to talk a little bit about Outlaw rogues. If Donald Trump can do it, so can I. Make Outlaw rogues great again. No? Okay. Well, I'm joking, of course. It's politicians. Can you honestly trust them? Either way, no matter how you look at politics, let's talk about something more important. Outlaw rogues. With patch 7.1.5 coming out really soon, they're going to be making changes to a bunch of specs and classes, and I'm pretty sure one of them is going to be Outlaw rogues. I'll actually be very surprised if they don't change any of the talents. So if a talent like Parlay gets to stay on the talent bars, I'll be very unhappy. But let's talk a little bit about what makes Outlaw rogues not as preferable as a playing spec for most players, and what are some of the issues with it, and how could Blizzard fix those issues in the future, especially with the patch 7.1.5 coming out. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the core mechanics, and then talk about, of course, a little bit of some of the talents, but I'm not going to touch on that for too long. And then I'm going to finish the video off with a little bit on aesthetics and talk a little bit about what they could do to make Outlaw rogues not only be fun to play, but also look like a lot of fun to play, because that's part of the game, is doing something fun while looking like a complete badass. And what else could you ask for? So let's get on to the video. Number one thing that I want to change, and this is something I can have a whole nother video on, roll the bones. What I've heard in the past before from people on roll the bones is the fact that they think that it is way too random chance of an ability, and I kind of agree with those people. And it's just, I like the ability. I think Roll the Bones is one of the most unique mechanics in the game, and it is such a cool mechanic that I think they should continue it. But I feel like they should also rethink it just a little bit. The issue with Roll the Bones is the fact that you have 6 different buffs that are all RNG chance to get, and there's issues that you're running into in PvE and PvP, and both of those issues are somewhat related to one another, and it is related back to the RNG aspect. So let me talk a little bit about, to bring you guys on my level as somebody who plays Outlaw Rogue for PvE and PvP on both sides of the content, I guess, and explain to you exactly what are some of the not issues but annoyances that I run into on a daily basis. So for the PvE aspect of the game, you never want a single buff. You want to get 2, 3, or 4 buffs. So you are always rolling until you get 2 buffs. Sometimes you get 2 really good buffs and your DPS increases. Sometimes you get 2 mediocre buffs and your DPS stops decreasing. But sometimes you're just rolling 1 buff over and over and over, and you just feel unsatisfied because you have cooldowns coming up and you have no good buffs to go with them. So that's not that fun. The fact that we have such a low value for the buffs that we are given, I feel like the fact that we have to keep rolling them over and over and over is a little bit annoying and not as fun. At first it was cool just to see like, oh, what random buff will I get? If all of these buffs were equal, and to see, oh, what random 1 buff will I get? That'd be awesome. And if you get 2, that's pretty lucky. And if you get 3, that's kind of rare. And if you get all 6, that's a legendary. That'd be neat, but right now each single buff feels kind of lackluster on their own. For PvP, on the other hand, some buffs, as single buffs, are decent. For example, energy regeneration buff is pretty good, crit buff is pretty good for new bursting, and true bearing is pretty good because you are able to get your cooldowns back much faster, which is awesome for arenas, BGs, burst in general. I think it's pretty good for 2s, because let's say you're playing against another team like Priest, Red, and every time you have your cooldowns available, they have the defensives, but because of the cooldown reduction buff, that's why it's so good for PvP, you're able to get your cooldowns back much faster before enemies have ways to counter your offensives. So you're able to get your cooldowns faster, adrenaline rushes up faster, but enemies don't have a bop, they don't have pain suppression, they don't have anything, they don't have CC to peel you off, and that's it. You kind of just push out ahead. And it helps, let's say if you're behind as an Outlaw Rogue, you pop your cooldowns early, and the enemies are about to get the cooldowns back. Cooldown reduction allows you to get your cooldowns back faster, allows you to get CC up faster, so you get ahead of the competition in one way or another, which is awesome. But for the most part, all the other buffs are not as good. I feel that the issue is 1 buff doesn't really mean much, and I'm kind of sad to see that. What I propose is, what if we maybe tone down how many buffs we had? Because 6 buffs and how they interact with one another to balance is a little bit much. I mean, I like the variety, but I feel like it's a little much. Let's cut it down to something like 4 buffs and make sure that all of those 4 buffs are a damage increase, but the only thing they do is change your playstyle. I mean, it's fine if, like, let's say that one of them gives you crit and some other buff and whatever, like, have them be in a similar fashion, but the main proponent for this is to have a varied playstyle, which I think will be pretty cool, a lot of fun, and it'll be better than having to just roll buffs over and over and over and over and over. So this way, when you get a buff, all you're changing is your playstyle rather than what abilities you're using and just how much damage you were dealing, because I think it's a little bit unfair to have a spec that's just all RNG on that aspect. For the most part, RNG shouldn't be that much of an issue in Legion, but it is still annoying when it happens, and Legion does want to, or devs from Legion do want to enable players to play their spec instead of having to wait for cooldowns to come up and having to wait for abilities. It's all about using abilities and doing things rather than just waiting there, waiting for things to take hold of. It's just too much. So I feel like maybe bring in a fun element but more reliable element back into Roll the Bones would be awesome. So 7.1.5 is a perfect time to rethink it. And okay, so that's the biggest issue that I had with Outlaw Rogues in terms of general mechanics. Now to add some mechanics in the game. Currently, Outlaw Rogue is an interesting spec with a pistol shot mechanic, so you have some pseudo ranged abilities. What if you were to give Outlaw Rogue some range style mechanic for PvP, or maybe like an optional mechanic for PvP? It's a lot like how we have Holy Paladins that can get a PvP wings where they can deal melee damage, becoming Healadin while still healing. It is also a reminiscent of when just Demonology Warlocks back in Mists of Pandaria were able to glove themselves in a way where they could technically sort of kind of become a tank for PvP. Like, they weren't really all that good, but for PvP, carrying flags, you could actually get pretty tanky. And it was kind of just a fun and interesting aspect of the game that worked in few select situations, but I think it was interesting. So maybe you could do something like that with Outlaw Rogue. You have this potential for pseudo range mechanic and the ability that you have pistol shots, but what if you were to swap the weapon from melee to ranged, but then some of the ranged abilities go back to melee? So you would get some kind of like, your basic combo point builder would be at range, but then you have to get into melee to get an extra, like, they say free saber slash or free pistol shot kind of mechanic would change up with the spec altogether. And your kidney, they could make it so that your kidney goes from a ranged stun to a melee stun back to a kidney shot rather than between the eyes, so it kind of would flip the tables a little bit or something along those lines. I feel like there's a lot of potential, and Blizzard could just do some kind of a cool talent change where it changes the playstyle a little bit altogether, which would give rogues a little bit different of a role. We already have a rogue spec that deals a lot of damage and brings all the regular rogue tools except for CC, and that is Assassination. But if you were to do something like this with the curveball for Outlaw, I feel like you would give a few different mechanics of fun playstyles, and of course you can expand more, but this is just one of the ideas that I have. Of course, I believe the Blizzard should clean up the talent bar for honor talents and class talents. Of course, I feel that Parlay should be either removed or heavily buffed, and there's a few other talents in similar rows that I feel like could use a little bit more love, or simply toss them out to get us something new and interesting. But we'll see how Blizzard does it in 7.1. But definitely Parlay shouldn't be on the field. Parlay should either be buffed or completely removed, or maybe even changed in terms of talents, or just get me something more competitive, because I'm pretty sure I'm not the only Outlaw Rogue that is asking for a more competitive talent that can be used for PvE or even PvP. Because otherwise it's basically like an in-combat sap or out-of-stealth sap. Usually once you're out of stealth, your enemies that are around you are in combat, so when the enemies are in combat, you can't sap them, so it becomes kind of useless. Now for the last part, aesthetically, I feel like Outlaw Rogues is an interesting spec. They have this pirate theme, which is something we haven't really seen in a while. And actually, I don't think we've really ever seen it with rogues, but in this expansion it is very much defined with a pirate theme. I feel like they could explore a little bit more on it. Give us more talents with a pirate theme. Give us more weird kind of curveball mechanics that have a pirate fantasy to it. I think that'd be interesting, because I feel like it's a big market that Blizzard can explore on, so people can not only have fun playing the spec, they can also have fun using abilities that are very pirate themed for their spec. I just think it'll be really cool aesthetically. That's really about it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Let me know everything in the comments below. What are your thoughts on everything, and what would you do differently with Outlaw Rogues? Thank you guys. I'll see you all tomorrow.